Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone. I wish I could be in Seoul with you and share our discussions, but Zoom is fairly efficient, so look forward to our talk today. I have talked often in Seoul about Korea and the Cptpp, and today I think I will continue my optimistic assessment of what can happen going forward. I think with free trade agreements of all kinds, bigger is better. You have a larger integrated economic area that you can source from, where there's trade liberalization, and so the more members in the integration area, the more opportunities for economic expansion. From the start, the Cptpp members realized that they would benefit from increased membership. So they immediately formulated procedures for accession negotiations of other countries and customs territories. At the top of their wish list for new members was, of course, the United States, the architect and negotiator of the original deal. And the hope was this would reverse the precipitous U.S. withdrawal from the pact in January of 2017, which I consider one of the biggest blunders of the Trump era. At this point, however, I have to conclude that the Biden administration seems disinclined to pursue negotiations at this time to rejoin the Asia-Pacific Trade Pact, and it's concentrating its energy instead on challenges to rebuild U.S. infrastructure and reinstitute U.S. climate initiatives. But the door is wide open for Korean participation in the Cptpp. It always has been, but Korean officials had more influence over the terms of their participation while the pact was being negotiated 5-6 years ago than today. Now, there is less flexibility to modify or exempt specific practices from Cptpp disciplines. There is a cost to pay for the poor policy choices of the past, both by Korea and by the United States, but both can recoup. And so let me say a few words on what can be done for each. I think there are several reasons why Korea should initiate accession negotiations sooner rather than later. Number one is first mover benefits. Korea lost out by not being an original negotiator, but it still can be in the first tranche of new members and able to help determine the terms of future accession talks with prospective candidate countries, possibly even China. Once you're in the deal, then you have a say over the terms of the accession of future members and how that deal will be structured. And so I think it's very important for Korea to get in sooner rather than later, so that it can influence that process to its own benefit. Second, membership in the regional pact with important trading partners like Japan and Australia better positions Korea in ongoing bilateral and trilateral trade negotiations with China. I think this has become even more significant over the past few months than it was in the previously. And one can see that being a part of the Cptpp would provide some leverage, some benefits for Korea in ongoing CJK negotiations. We can talk about that in more detail. Third, the accession to the deal should be relatively easy, since the Cptpp essentially was built on the robust foundation of the Chorus FTA. Korea applied most of the Cptpp obligations long ago because they're quite similar to the Chorus. Fourth, Korea has bilateral free trade agreements with most of the Cptpp countries, so accession would simply modernize those existing agreements. Again, not a big lift and something where there's benefits. 5, Korea has signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, so already has substantial liberalization commitments with 7 of the Cptpp countries, including Japan, that are parties to both pacts. Now, you might say, so why bother with Cptpp if Korea already has a partnership with the Cptpp countries? I think there's 2 reasons. First, the Cptpp is more comprehensive, so is an upgrade of the existing pacts, so would accord more benefits for Korea in an improved bilateral relationship with each of the Cptpp members. And 2, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, some of its parts. As with RCEP benefits from accumulating rules of origin would benefit Korean industries that could source across the entire region. And so having that improves the efficiency of supply chains. Korea has a benefit from RCEP. Being in Cptpp would improve the scope somewhat of that efficiency of supply chain management. I think that's very important. In fact, one of the most important aspects of RCEP, and would be very important that Korea be in Cptpp for the same reason when some of its competitors are in both. Now, the question is how much more Korea will be asked to contribute by current Cptpp members in terms of tariff cuts and reforms of non-tariff measures affecting trade in industrial and farm goods and services. And of course, the accession process involves 2 parts. One is agreement on the existing terms of the agreement, the rulemaking provisions. And the second part is bilateral market access schedules with each of the participating countries. Because of the existing free trade agreements, that obviously is not a great problem for Korea with most of its countries. But of course, the questions have arisen time and time again. What would Japan ask of Korea in terms of market access? And would Korea be in a disadvantageous position in that market access component of the accession process? Unlike the Chorus FTA, which exempted Korean rice, all products have been subject to trade reforms under the Cptpp. That was one of the points that the United States insisted on when it drafted and negotiated the original Trans-Pacific Partnership. However, note that the required liberalization of Japanese rice and other sensitive farm goods in the Cptpp was subject to only modest increase in tariff rate quotas. I would expect that precedent to apply in Korea's accession talks as well. In sum, I think Korean concerns about the terms of entry, that the terms of entry into the Cptpp will be costly are, in my opinion, greatly exaggerated. At a time of growing U.S.-China economic friction, Korea and Japan have to work together and with the United States to safeguard shared national economic and security interests. And this is one of the reasons why I cited earlier the importance of added leverage in the CJK talks. Those broader shared interests in commercial relations, I think will constrain pressures for major new Korean trade concessions from Japan and other Cptpp members. And so I'm relatively optimistic that the attraction of having a major economy like the Korean economy in the club will greatly pave the road to an easy accession process. Now, if Korea decides to apply for Cptpp membership, there are several different approaches it could pursue. One, it could follow the recent example of the United Kingdom and formally apply for membership, and on terms largely covered by Korea's existing bilateral trade agreements with the Cptpp countries. Now, that can be done separately from the United Kingdom application and negotiation, or the two could be linked together. There is some safety in numbers when negotiating membership terms to an existing club in accession negotiations. And of course, the Korea UK continuity agreement that was worked out recently is essentially very similar to KORUS and to what is in the Cptpp. So working together makes some sense. But the decision on whether there will be individual accession negotiations or group accession negotiations really is up to the existing member countries to decide whether to pursue talks with one country at a time or with a group of countries. The third option for Korea would be to wait for US officials to return to the table and join them in accession talks. But that could mean being on the sidelines for some time while other countries move up the queue, become members, and thus add to the specific demands that each Cptpp member can ask of prospective members. I think there's no reason to wait and take that risk. I'm not sure what the United States will do and on what timetable, though the conventional wisdom is that President Biden will not move on Cptpp or a new version of it before the crucial midterm election of 2022. I suspect, however, that there could be action-forcing events in the region that convince President Biden of the need to strengthen economic ties with key allies such as Korea more quickly, so to improve the position against the economic and security challenges from China. And part of that response would be renegotiating US participation, probably in a somewhat new and rebranded Asia-Pacific Pact. And there, I think there is precedent in what the United States did in renegotiating the NAFTA and turning it into a U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement, the USMCA, very similar to the old agreement with great improvements imported from the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So I think there is scope for the United States returning to the negotiating table sooner rather than later, prompted by its strategic interests in competing and possibly confronting China in the Asia-Pacific region. So there's more I could talk about the United States if you're interested, but I've used up my my introductory time, and I'm happy to. I was given 10 minutes, so I'd be happy to talk about what I think the United States will do going forward during our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for your very insightful and encouraging speech. I think your policy options that you suggested will benefit for the Korean government to make in building new strategy for Cptpp. We have a lot of questions for you, but I selected two gentlemen. Theo Park, our former trade minister, has the first question.
Okay, Jeff, nice seeing you. You moved to Washington from Florida finally.
No, I'm actually still in Florida because
in Florida. Oh, okay. Yes. All right. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I share the exactly same view with you on the Korea's early accession to the Cptpp. If I add one more thing to your presentation, I would like to point out that this is a right timing for Korea to join the Cptpp, since not much is going on at the multilateral trading system of the WTO. So this is right time for Korea to do something. In the interest of time, I would like to raise very brief two questions. As we understand, the Cptpp may require consensus among the existing members for their decision to accept new members. In this situation, I'm wondering if there are some members to oppose Korea's joining the CPTPP. Some people in Korea think that Japan may not welcome Korea to become a member of CPTPP because of some political as well as historical conflicts between the two nations. So there are some worry about that kind of thing. But in fact, I'm wondering that possibly another member like Mexico may not support Korea's joining the CPTPP. I'm not sure, I'm not 100% sure about that. But the reason why I'm saying this is this. I remember that Mexico did not show its interest in having FTA, bilateral FTA with Korea since a long time ago, in early 2000, as far as I remember. So at the time, we understand that Mexico always considered Korea as a tough competitor in the US market, since both nations are exporting much to the US market. So in any case, I would like to hear your opinion about this kind of possibility. That's why in Korea, maybe we should join or negotiate with the CPTPP members along with the United States could be much more helpful for Korea. This is my hypothetical question, so I want to hear your opinion. My second brief question is about the possibility Biden administration, instead of going back to TPP or joining the CPTPP, may pursue sectoral agreements with like-minded nations in such areas as semiconductors or batteries or digital trade. I would like to hear your thinking about these plurilateral agreement to be pursued during the Biden presidency. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Taeho. It's always great to see you. And I just wish you didn't have such difficult questions, but very appropriate ones. Let me take your first one. The Cptpp procedures require consensus. Right now, it is consensus among 7 countries because 4 countries have not yet ratified the agreement, and so they would not participate in the negotiations. But the 2 countries that you mentioned are in the deal, so they would. I think this is an issue that I raised with the incoming Biden administration when my institute presented memos on foreign international economic issues that they needed to be concerned about. And one of the reasons why I recommended early review and of the CPTPP for the Biden administration was that it was important to strengthen the alliance with our key political and commercial allies in the region, and to ensure that we're working together so that we're all on the same page in boosting our competitiveness against China, because that's essentially what the TPP was meant to do from the beginning. Some say it was containment, though nobody wanted to break commercial relations with China because everyone had important trade and investment ties. But they wanted to use the trade agreement, the TPP, to strengthen their own economies and their ability to compete more effectively against China at home and abroad. So it is in the interest of the United States to ensure that Japan and Korea are in the most favorable commercial position when we are asking, when the Biden administration, following up from what was done in the Trump administration, is asking Korea to follow the export control restrictions and some changes in supply chains that result from U.S. Policies vis-a-vis China. And this is only going to get worse as the Biden administration imposes sanctions on China related to developments in Xinjiang and Hong Kong and possibly Taiwan going forward. That's another concern that the Biden administration and the U.S. Congress has, that that China may seek to isolate Taiwan, and Taiwan may which also wants to join the CPTPP, may need that commercial alliance. I think this is something that once the Biden administration's team is fully in place, there will be a lot of effort to ensure that the United States, Korea, and Japan are on the same page, and that where there are political frictions between Japan and Korea, which I've talked about in the past, that I think need to be compartmentalized. I do not dismiss the seriousness of the problem, but one should keep it in its perspective and not pursue policies that are costly to economic growth in the country. With regard to Mexico, I think the Mexican position of the past is should be more flexible now that Mexico has the USMCA, because there is a greater protection of the regional arrangement because of higher rules of origin. That said, the regime of Andres Lopez Obrador is a little erratic, and they have pursued policies that seemingly are in violation of the USMCA. So we may have some friction with Mexico, and I don't think Mexico can pick too many fights. So I'm not too worried about Mexico either. So the second question you had was on sectoral Pacs, and this is something that Wendy Cutler has been talking about, because she sees the digital trade chapter of the USMCA as a template that other countries could sign on to, and Japan did so basically more than a year ago as part of its Phase 1 agreement with the United States. It's something that the United States will try to push with its other trading partners as it upgrades its free trade agreements. So I suspect that sooner rather than later, Catherine Tai will be coming to Seoul and saying, now let's look at ways we can make the KORUS FTA better. And I think she's got a lot on her plate right now with climate change and with dealing with vaccine nationalism and trying to get some deal that helps mitigate the pandemic that we're all suffering. So I don't see bilateral trade negotiations as being at the top of her agenda in the very near term. But it's something you need to think about as the Biden administration proceeds into year 2, that they will be turning to ways of improving existing Pacs. The issue on semiconductors, my colleague Chad Bown has written some papers and is doing extensive research on that. So I recommend that you look at what he has on the Peterson Institute website. Here it is either a clash or a meshing of industrial policies. And the question is, how do we boost our capacity and remove vulnerability to supply chains, deal with short-term shortages that are impeding production in the autos and other sectors, and ensure that that we have appropriate and necessary capacity, productive capacity, to meet our needs going forward. And I think that puts Samsung in a very good position. And the United States is probably going to encourage, promote some investment in U.S.-based facilities, but there may be an opportunity for allied firms in our key allies to participate in that. So I don't think sectoral Pacs is going to get that far, but that's important questions deserve the long answer.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Professor An Deok-keun from Seoul University has the second question.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. Let me be brief. You seem to have some idea about what Biden administration will do. That is actually our interest. So could you make some comments about what do you think the Biden administration is ready, for example, to initiate any trade negotiation with Asia Pacific countries, or what we'll do, when it will do, and so forth? So just to follow, comments.
Well, I am no longer an advisor to USTR. Bob Lighthizer fired me for disagreeing with him. But it's interesting, the team that has been assembled at USTR, and it has drawn on sort of the most experienced trade advisors in the Congress to come in as deputies, but it will take some time for them to have their hearings and confirmation votes. So there will be still a lag before the sub-cabinet team at USTR, the deputies, are in place. And indeed, one of the deputies hasn't even been nominated, the one that would go to Geneva to work on WTO matters, which is telling, I think, that they are moving on the domestic front and drawing on people who have close ties to the White House and to key members of Congress. So Sarah Bianchi has worked with President Biden in the White House and at the University of Delaware and elsewhere. So it's always good to have somebody who knows the president. And Mike Froman could tell you that. But these are people that don't have a lot of international experience. They have a lot of experience in domestic trade negotiations, which are very, very important. Obviously, the lesson of the TPP was you can go through 6 years of international negotiations, and it all for nothing if you don't know how to conduct domestic trade negotiations. So I think the Biden team is very strong on in terms of their links to the key constituencies supporting the White House. They don't have, I think, a well-developed international trade negotiating strategy. And I think that's because the president himself said that will go forward once we have reinvigorated the US economy and done the work on boosting our competitiveness through the infrastructure investment and the like. I think that's their hope, but as I mentioned in my talk, I think foreign events will force some changes in that approach. And that's why I think there will be more interest in the United States in looking at CPTPP going forward. But there's a real political constraint about engaging in high-level trade negotiations before the 2022 election.
Thank you, Jeff, for your kind answers and sharing precious time with us. Jeff, you are vaccinated, right?
Yes, I am.
Good for you. Good for you.
2 doses of Moderna, so I am ready to come as soon as
Okay.
the gates are open.
We'll be waiting for you. Okay. Take care. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.